about those vice presidential debates. I don't know that they have any impact on elections. I don't think people are looking at vice presidential nominees and are saying, well, I'm not voting for the presidential nominee because their vice president or vice presidential running mate is the devil. I mean, I think that's generally been true throughout election history, that vice presidential debates don't really matter that much until perhaps now. Now, it's not that I think either Mike Pence or Kamala Harris said anything last night that changed voters' minds who were undecided about voting for either presidential candidate. I think what happened last night is that the vice presidential candidates just further proved how terrible both options for president are right now. And considering the health of both of the very old white men running for president, most normal, sane, and lucid people aren't too excited about the possibilities of either one of those old white men if they cannot fulfill the duties of the presidency, and the mantle of imperialist power goes to either Mike Pence or Kamala Harris. Now, Pence, who I told you doesn't have a personality, proved me right last night. While he was calmer than his boss, he was still an empty vessel of lies and obfuscation. He's the most vanilla of all memes about vanilla without anyone actually liking his type of vanilla. Oh, Pence is a true believer in the completely made-up obsession with the unborn that right-wing Christo-fascists have. So when he answered the question about how the next Trump-Pence administration would handle pre-existing conditions should the ACA be struck down by the Supreme Court, he was very serious when his answer was that he was proud of standing with a pro-life president, or whatever Christo-fascist birth cult stuff he said was. But that birth cult within the religious right that really is the religious right, it's a whole big birth cult, is really only interested in keeping women from being able to have an abortion. That is literally the only pre-existing condition they recognize as worth protecting. So all you heathens with diabetes and high blood pressure and cancer are on your own. But if you get pregnant, though, Harris, however, refused to answer the question about whether the Democrats would pack the court. And that seemed incredibly silly to me because, listen, this is the Democrats' problem. They do these silly things that they think are strategic, believing that they're playing some ridiculous 5D chess that nobody can figure out, when actually all they're doing is appearing weak and spineless in the face of a political opponent that has reveled in smashing the Democrats in the mouth over the past 10 years and are now calling up the troops to do that to people in the streets, literally. Harris's answer should have been, in my opinion, of course we're going to stack the courts. You Republicans have been doing it since the Tea Party coup of the GOP, and then they took control of the Senate. That's all y'all been doing is stacking the court. So turnabout is fair play. All's fair in war and politics. Two can play at that game, Pence. That's what she should have said. What's good for the goose and all that kind of stuff. Call the GOP out on their dirt and commit to being just as dirty to get the job done, but do it to protect the people, if that's what you're in it for. But since that's not what the Democrats are in it for, they're in it to protect the corporations. Of course, they're not going to do that. The only reality in which anyone believes that the Democratic ticket is a tool of the extreme left is among those same rabidly racist right-wing Christo-fascists who will support Trump-Pence no matter what they do and believe Black people demanding an end to the police violating our rights, bodies, and right to live is actually divisive. The thing is that that's been around maybe 45% of the population. Maybe a little less now that their savior has come down with the virus that wasn't supposed to exist and wasn't supposed to affect hardly anybody, but it is still hundreds of millions of people in this country. Listen to what I said. Hundreds of millions of people in this country who do believe every internet spread lie about Antifa, Black Lives Matter, and Democrat-run cities burning to the ground because of those folks. This is a whole lot of people who live in the Midwest and in other states that are sparsely populated and even more sparsely populated by Black people who they literally don't live anywhere near Black folks. A lot of white people in this country just don't. And I don't say that rhetorically, folks. There are entire cities in several states where the Black population is less than 5%, and the surrounding cities and counties nearly zero. We're everywhere in the world, we Black folks, that's true, but we're not everywhere in this country. And you have to take this into account when you look at the people who would believe the lies about racial injustice and racial police terrorism and the people fighting against it. A whole lot of people who live in the exurbs and commute for hours into the cities to work, but make that sacrifice because honestly, they just don't want to live where they can see the poverty and criminalization of entire communities that they continue to vote for politicians to continue to perpetuate so they can feel safe from the unclean in those cities getting close to them. Pence knows this. Trump may be a wild card and a little bit of a loose cannon. Okay, well, a lot. But Pence knows this. So that's why he says what he does. He's not going to convince anyone outside of that group of people to believe it, though. What they're hoping is that those people within that group can convince some of their friends to believe it. Maybe not everybody, but enough to put them over that magic 270 number to win the Electoral College. Now, nobody should be surprised that Pence doesn't believe racism is a problem with the police or anywhere else for that matter, or that Harris responded to a question about the Breonna Taylor case by pivoting to Trump's refusal to denounce white supremacists. Look, white politicians who know that their supporters are racists and who are very likely racist themselves will never admit that racism exists and it's a problem. And you're not going to find a whole lot of prosecutors who are going to talk about a fellow prosecutor in public, even if the former prosecutor is a Black woman and the prosecutor in question is a Black man who is clearly trying to cover up the negligent homicide by a white cop of an innocent Black woman. But come on, y'all. All that's really boring and pointless political banner. None of that really matters or is interesting at all. What's really important, what really won the debate was the fly. That's right, the fly that landed on the half-alive carcass of Mike Pence, or at least the vessel that used to be Mike Pence, because who knows what ghoulish spirit is embodied in that flesh now. I told you that Mike Pence wasn't all there, and the fly confirmed it. Mike Pence is among the legion of the undead, and the fly uncovered the plot. Wouldn't it be great if this were actually true, like some plot from a badly scripted but emotionally satisfying horror movie? But it's not. Mike Pence is the soulless monster that he appears to be, who believes the ridiculous lies his boss and their followers traffic in that will continue to cost people's lives as they do nothing to respond to this pandemic or to racist police terror or to climate catastrophe or to income inequality. But so is Kamala Harris in her manufacturing of a kind of soul-like banter for Black people to identify with, I suppose, but without an actual soul for the suffering of Black people and other marginalized groups that she rose through the ranks on and whose boss isn't going to do much about any of the things Trump and Pence will ignore either. We really are living in a horror movie after all, y'all. Follow Luqman Nation on patreon.com/LuqmanNation for lots of great content.